Well, thank you very much, Tamar. And at this point, we'll kind of shift into the second part of the program. Before I do that, I want to make sure to thank again the Des Moines Partnership, Gene Meyer, Jay Byers, and their team here. Immigration is typically we talk about it as more of a social issue, and that causes a lot of political arguments and emotions, etc. But there's also that urgency in terms of competitiveness that Tamar touched on, and that's why the partnership is hosting this hearing here today. They are focused on job creation and economic development every single day here, and Jay and Gene and all of the employees here want to do everything they can to move Des Moines forward and make sure that we're competitive here in Des Moines and in the state of Iowa. And I think if we can kind of shift the focus of immigration to jobs and opportunity and economic development, we'll have a better chance of some common sense reform. So I again want to commend Gene and Jay for their leadership and thank them for hosting this important discussion today. At this time, I'm going to ask the three panelists to join us. I'd also ask you to do two things once you are seated. Number one, if you could kind of respond generally to Tamar's opening comments and to get your thoughts on our task force goals and objectives, and two, to share your experience a little bit. I'd like to give you both about 5 minutes, all three of you about 5 minutes to kind of open and share your experience and your own thoughts and feelings on immigration reform. So why don't you all join us, and then I'll introduce the three of you formally. We'll start with Ziad Ismael, again a doctor at Mercy Medical Center here in Des Moines. Mercy has really taken a leadership role, as many of you know, on immigration reform. They've stressed the importance of immigration reform on the healthcare system, and we're glad to have Ziad with us today. He was born in Damascus, Syria. He obtained his MD from Damascus University in Syria, and he completed his internal medicine residency at Damascus University. He was then a resident at the University of Pittsburgh Medical Center, Shadyside Hospital, and he completed a fellowship training in pulmonary and critical care medicine at the University of New Mexico in Albuquerque, New Mexico. He is board certified in internal medicine, pulmonary disease, and critical care, and he now practices in Des Moines. Julie Sorci is the Vice President of Human Resources at Compressor Controls Corporation here in Des Moines, a company that specializes in turbo machinery controls, and they've been here in Des Moines and Central Iowa for 35 years. The company has offices in 11 countries around the world, and Julie is a member of the steering committee of the Iowa Immigration Education Coalition. She earned her BS in Food and Nutrition in Business from the University of Northern Iowa and her MS from Michigan State University. And Tez Dahwan is a principal and mentor in residence at Startup City in Des Moines, a technology startup incubator that provides entrepreneurs with active mentoring, educational curriculum, services, and a workspace conducive to peer sharing that takes ideas to the next level. He created his own company, Advanced Technologies Group, Inc. He's a native of India, and he earned his BA in mathematics and computer science at Central College in Pella, and studied computers at the University of Missouri, Kansas City. So please join me in welcoming our panel. And we'll start with you, Ziad.
Hello, everybody. So, thank you for the introduction, and thank you for inviting me to speak in front of this highly intelligent crowd. And my area of expertise, if any, relating to the immigration issue is the fact that I've been, and I'm still going through the official channels of getting into a green card and permanent resident of the United States, and hopefully subsequently into the citizenship pathway. I was born and raised in Syria, came to the States initially on my initial visa was a visitor's visa, subsequently was transformed into a J1 visa, which is part of the exchange program for physicians and for scientists. My pathway was the alien physician pathway, and that was for the duration of my 6 years of training, split between Pittsburgh and Albuquerque. And I've been here in Des Moines for a little over than 3 years now on another Immigration Act, which is called the Conrad 30 Act, which is the act that allowed me to transform my alien physician exchange visa into an H-1B visa, which is a worker's visa. And I am right now in the process of transforming this visa into a permanent residency or a green card visa. So I'm happy to answer any questions regarding of these issues. Of course, I know a lot about the process from going through it, and I also know a lot of stories about similar processes that some of my friends and coworkers and colleagues have been through. So.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon. I'm Julie Sorci. I'm with Compressor Controls Corporation. It was a company that was started by an immigrant from Russia. We have a strong history with a lot of Russian immigrants. Within our Des Moines facility here, we have employees from 26 countries. So we have a nice melting pot, so to say, right here in the Midwest. Why immigration is so important to us isn't just because it's our roots, but it's also our future. And when we talk about competitiveness, that is where our growth is. Our growth is 90% outside of the U.S. And so in order for us to continue to grow, as we were talking about 2025, it doesn't seem like it's that far away, but it is, coming up on us fast, is we need knowledgeable workers to service our customers, regardless of where they're located. So with that, in the U.S., we have employees that service around the globe. We also have employees that are based in 12 different countries. And our goal is to get closer to our customer, to have the culture and the language abilities to make our customers feel comfortable. So I look at any of you, when you're calling and you're being serviced by someone, who do you feel comfortable with? It's somebody who you can make a connection with, whether it be a physician or another care provider. It's finding that connection. So for us, immigration reform, finding knowledgeable workers is key. Not having enough H-1Bs slows me down on hiring. And I think anybody in this room can say it slows you down on hiring when you're trying to find individuals. Our average employee makes $65,000 a year in Des Moines. And that's the broad base from the manufacturing non-exempt to, of course, our highly skilled people. So when I'm looking for engineers in the community, and I tell you, we recruit a lot from Iowa State, we do engineering programs, we're paying people a good, livable, sustainable wage for them and their families. So with that, immigration's critical for our business growth, both within the U.S. and outside. I think many of you also probably look at the U.S. Commerce reports. Same thing that's going on with Compressor Controls is going across the world, across, I should say, the U.S., and that's increasing their business outside of the U.S. That's where the growth's happening. So we have to start looking more like our customers. So that's my 2 cents on immigration. Turn it over.
Thank you. I came to the U.S. in '87 as an F1 student. We'll probably go through the whole alphabet here shortly. And I did not go through the H1 process, but rather married somebody who was born in Iowa, but her family immigrated on the Mayflower, actually. So that's where her history comes from. But I started a company after graduating from college here in Des Moines, sold it to the company that became ATG. I actually did not start Advanced Technologies Group, but sold my company to Advanced Technologies. And then I exited that firm a couple of years ago and have been in the process of mentoring new startups in this area. And if you think of the history of Iowa, Iowa did not attract employees for other companies. Iowa's original inhabitant, Julian Dubuque, was a lead miner. He was an entrepreneur in the late 1700s. Today, you have hundreds of H-1Bs mining data in this state. We haven't changed that much in these 200 and some years. What has changed is how we attract those entrepreneurs into this community. Whether it is the H-1B program or the J-1s or the processes that get people through the legal immigration cycles that I went through, and was ultimately successful in becoming a citizen and resident of this city, this state, this community, and am able to return back to the very community. We need to be able to make that process easier for people who are wanting to invest in this region.
Very good.
Thank you.
Thank you. Tamara, why don't you start with any question you might have for the panelists, and then we'll open it up.
Yeah, what great stories. You know, I talk about this from 30,000 feet. You know, it's a lot better to like be here and hear it from the people who are really living it. I guess I just want to highlight maybe, you know, the alphabet soup. What it really shows, you know, it shows how hard it is. You know, when you go out and you talk to Americans, if we went out on the street and we asked people, what do you think about immigration? You know, they all say, well, like, why don't they just go down to the post office and pick up their papers? You know, they assume that, you know, it's easy, that of course there must be a way to come. You know, we're an open country, we're a nation of immigrants. You just have to go through the process. And what most people don't understand is how hard the process is. And, you know, even for people like this, we're so lucky to have people like these two guys want to be here and want to contribute and listen to the years of their lives and you know, paperwork and difficulty, and that's doesn't even think about how hard it is for like a Mexican, you know, unskilled Mexican, who we also need. So, you know, in a way, I think, you know, when I think about sort of, I mean, part of our job, in a way, our task force and this panel too, we're trying to do two things, which is both talk to the Congress, but also talk to people in our community who don't get it. And the more like I kind of hear people's story, the most important thing to tell them is how hard it is to come here. Mm-hmm. You know, that alphabet soup. So I guess let me ask you each, like, so if you're gonna fix one thing about the system, what would it be? Like one thing, don't just say make it easier to come, but like fix one, you know, not too specific, sort of middle layer.
Well, I guess I'll take a go at this. So the process of getting to the final or end point of immigration, which is becoming a legal resident or permanent resident of the U.S. or a citizen after a number of years, the process is actually all linked together into a one number. One
Yeah.
case number.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, there are, on the road, there are many steps, and every step seems to be an individual, endless trail of paperwork. And one way that potentially can make things easier, you start the process and it goes through the channels. Once you have checkpoints, you fulfill obligations, regulations, standards, pass, check. We'll move on to the next check mark, which would make things a lot easier in the long run.
Smart. Yeah, it's really smart.
I would see the problem of fixing both the low numbers of STEM graduates from our schools and colleges and the existing student populations sort of coming together over a 10 to 20 year period. If you look at STEM data, STEM student data, children from K-12 are not focusing on STEM at this point. The numbers are decreasing. So as we try and change the tide in our schools, at the same time we address the foreign student problem, foreign students leaving back for the home country, by saying, don't just staple the green card. I don't agree with the part that let's just staple a green card to every college graduate who's of foreign birth, but rather let the student become a little more in control of their own destiny. So as those students can do practical training out of their colleges, let them go into the practical training. If they have the ability to hire themselves into the compressor controls of this world, let them then immediately apply for their permanent residency.
Yeah.
Don't make them dependent on an H-1B employer to sponsor them. Make that process easier. These are students who are educated. They're able to fill out that paperwork themselves. Don't just hand it in. Don't make it an entitlement, but rather an earn-in process, so that they
That's
become equal to most of us in this room and
Yeah.
are able to employ themselves.
Yeah, that's great.
Julie, is there one thing as an employer that would help make your life a little easier?
Again, I have to reiterate these gentlemen's, the paperwork process is lengthy and it's long. When I look at our employees who come to us fresh out of college, the average employee, it's 10+ years before they get their green card. And so think about that. I mean, I reiterate, just getting the word out of how long it takes these people. And these are professionals. And they're trying to bring in their families, they're trying to settle, they're paying taxes, of course, while they're here. They're purchasing homes and condos and vehicles, so they're spending money. But think about having that hold over your head every time you get a notification of going, oh, great, I got an immigration person that I have to start back with ground zero, right, and re-educate them. But just to know that it's hanging over your head that you could potentially be deported. What if you go home to your home country for a holiday and come back and you're held up trying to get in? And they break apart their family. We've had that within our organization as well. We've had to call Davis Brown Laurie's firm for a lot of assistance when people are traveling back and forth. So the, I guess, unfortunate part of the families and the impact on them personally, I think we need to get that message out.
And productivity, right? Because they don't know that for sure that they're staying, and it's hard to get promoted. And
Well, I wouldn't say people are getting promoted, but it's that, I guess, that burden of having on your shoulder, of not knowing what the next step is, or shit, you can't bring your parents in to stay with you, again, because of the process.
If I may add to the family and productivity side, when a potential employee comes in with an H-1 degree, especially from a country like India or China, where it's not just the person you're hiring who's likely with a college degree, but chances are their spouse is also a professional. When
They
that
can't
spouse arrives here, the visa that the spouse arrives on doesn't permit them to work.
Yeah.
So you're essentially bringing a person allowing a person to come into the country and then not having them join the workforce. And in many cases, and I'd say, similar cases where I've had a dozen or more H-1 applicants where the spouse was a highly professional working spouse in their home country, essentially had to be, visiting libraries or taking classes
Right.
because they had nothing else to do.
Yeah.
So we're killing part of the workforce through that H-4.